Hello again. This is your favorite face on the screen again. Well, maybe not your favorite. It's the one you're stuck with. Sorry about that. Anyhow, we talked about controls. Now we're going to talk about hazards because that's what controls are for, to control hazards. So let's get on with that. And we're going to talk about physical hazards because that's the name of this game, right? Physical hazards control. So we're going to control physical hazards. Maybe you got to know what they are. Physical hazards control. There's three general types of hazards: physical, chemical, and biological. So, and biological, diseases, that type of thing. Chemical, well, chemicals, duh. And physical. So this semester, we're just going to deal with physical hazards. That's why it's called physical hazard control. We might touch on chemical a little bit, but as a rule, no. So we're going to talk about common physical hazards. And you're probably familiar with most of these, but we're going to go over them anyhow. Slips, trips, and falls. That's a hazard at work and at home even. You got falls from height, maybe for lack of railings or no fall protection. Slips and trips on walking working surfaces. Slippery floors, poor housekeeping, uneven walking surfaces. I was a plant in Illinois. I come out, I think it was Illinois. I come out of the packaging. The end of it was they had plastic bags on some stuff, some small ones. They were on the floor. And I come out of the office, and me, I walk pretty fast. I hit one of them plastic bags, and wham! I went down on my butt for everybody. I got hurt, but it made me realize somebody could get hurt that way. So, and people do get hurt, slip, strips, and falls. Believe me, especially most factories have concrete floors, and only concrete floor can be very, very harmful. So, poor housekeeping. That's what we had there. Uneven walking surfaces. It's easy to do when the surface is uneven, you're not used to it. Struck by is a hazard. Accelerated massive strikes the body. Falling objects, projectiles could be. Struck against. Now this is the body part contacting a surface. It's usually initiated by the person, like a tool slips, knuckle buster, or that type of thing. In other words, you hit against something. And let's see. You're going to see this pictured in an assignment later on, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. You're going to pick out the hazards in it. Sharp edges or instruments, cuts, lacerations, etc., caused by knives. There's straight knives, round knives, reciprocating. Sharp corners can cut you, burrs, broken glass. Knives, let's say straight, round, or reciprocating is there's a round knife is used in the textile industry, and reciprocating knives are used to cut cloth. And they can be pretty dangerous. Mechanical hazards, body part exposed to crush, cutting, tearing, or shearing, usually caught in or caught between, including in-running nip points. Mechanical failure could be a hazard. It exceeds design capacity, then it breaks or somehow fails. Maybe it's not adequately maintained. Failure of a safeguard to function. You might have a safeguard and it doesn't work, and that could be a hazard, especially if people think it works. There's another picture of some other hazards. We're going to talk about it later. Common physical hazards, again, electrical, could be a fire. The firemen will say that electrical is one of the most common causes of home fires, probably right after kitchen fires. Overheating or arcing to the point of combustion or ignitions of flammables or electrical equipment. They could cause electrical equipment damage. Shock is contact with exposed conductors. A device that's incorrectly grounded, such as when a metal ladder comes into contact with power lines. Noise levels that result in hearing loss. There's an OSHA regulation on hearing conservation. We're going to cover that in depth in a couple of modules from now. Visibility, lack of lighting or obstructed vision results in a hazard. That's a hazard. You don't have proper visibility. Ergonomics, strains and sprains. Damage to tissue due to overexertion, bad posture, repetitive motion. Those are three common perils that you look for in ergonomics. Fire or heat, temperatures that can cause burns of the skin or damage to other organs. Explosion, which is usually over pressurization. Sudden and violent release of a large amount of gas or energy due to a significant pressure difference, such as a rupture of a boiler or a compressed gas cylinder. Most states, I would think, have boiler inspectors, and frequently they're done. They farm it out. The insurance company does to have boiler. Some of their contractors, but or maybe they work for the insurance company. But frequently, it's done by the insurance company, even though the state might have a bureau or the boilers. I know Arkansas and Oklahoma both have them, but the inspectors are done by somebody from your insurance company. Because they got the ones that have the skin in the game, so to speak. And I used to go around with the guy that did that, and some guys after they switched companies, switched carriers, and it was interesting. And they would check every pressure vessel we had, not just boiler. They were called boiler inspectors, and we had a lot of pressure vessels with ammonia in them, or they could be just air compressors. And every one of them has a MAWP, maximum allowed working pressure, and has a pressure relief valve. And they would make sure that the pressure relief valve was set to go off at no higher than the maximum allowable working pressure. And they would test them. It's not always, but usually. And they wouldn't test them. They'd make one of us do them. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't touch it in case it's stuck in the open or something like that. They wouldn't be liable for it. Temperature, extreme heat. High temperatures can result in heat stress, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Heat stroke can be deadly. What's the matter with that picture? It's got something like his eyes. Cold temperature can result in hypothermia or frostbite. In the chicken plants, they had a spiral freezer that the raw chicken went at the bottom, the unfrozen chicken went around in a great big spiral all the way up to the top, maybe 10 feet high, and it came out and it was frozen. It was so the problems in there would be the maintenance guys would go in there, and some guys they want to get the job done so bad they wouldn't stop when they should, and get frostbite. Why does it matter? Why do worry about hazards matter? Well, people get seriously injured, mangled, limbs amputated. People die sometimes. So we care about that. Mechanical hazards, machine motions. We'll talk about various machine motions. Rotating machinery, protruding objects, burrs, screws, in-running nip points. So protruding objects like a shaft end. I've talked about this in several classes. Any shaft, rotating shaft. If it's a smooth shaft that doesn't have any burrs or cutouts for a keyway in it, they can protrude no more than half the diameter, but has burrs, screws, or keyway in it. It cannot protrude at all. It's got to be cut off flush or covered. In-running nip points are very dangerous. Reciprocating motions back and forth like that. You think by now this guy would learn to get out of the way. And there's a lay that got hold of somebody. Get hold of their clothing and just ripped around there and just ripped them apart, literally. Rotating abrasive wheels. These can be nasty. Now, any place you have a bench grinder like this, you want to make sure that the tongue and the tool rests are adjusted properly, because OSHA will look at that. We had one over at the Carson plant in California, and we got OSHA wrote us up for it. And every time I went over that plant, I caught something. I'd find it out of adjustment. So I, in frustration one day, saw it over there. I went into the conference room where the vice president was having some kind of a meeting, and I walked in there, and I plopped something down on a table in front of her, and it was the plug of the grinder. I said, this grinder won't be doing that again. That's the last time we had a problem with that. I cut the plug off it. Yeah. This is exposed shaft end. And in this particular incident, the remnants of workers' coveralls, the coveralls got caught and they didn't get hurt, just ripped them up. But that's what happens with exposed shaft end. Rolling mills, nasty. Calendar rolls. Calendar rolls are in the textile industry, and they're usually at the end of a process when they put a lot of times they're heated maybe, or embossed something. They put a pattern on something. And we had there was a company that we bought out in Mid-America Fibers in Illinois. I mean, it's in St. Louis, yeah. And they had a guy who was, they would feed the web of the fiber going through it. And what you normally do is you fold it over to make a point, and you get a stick and you stick the point through there, a thin stick to pull it through. Well, familiarity breeds contempt. You get around this stuff, work around it for a couple of years, nothing happens. So this guy, instead of using a stick, he used his fingers. Well, he grabbed his fingers. Instinctively, this happens a lot. When one hand gets caught, you instinctively try to help the other hand, and he tried it, and both his hands went into these calendar rules. There was no, he stopped nearby. It was before I got there. And I'm sure he hollered. By the time they shut it off, it had smashed his arms and just pushed all this stuff up from his arms all the way up, like near shoulders, and then it just blew. And he lost both of his arms completely. Very nasty. Mechanical hazards, machine motions, transverse motions like a conveyor belt. And then, of course, you have in-ring that points to gears, chains, and sprockets, spoke flywheels. It's intermeshing gears. Anytime you have that, that's a hazard, big time. And chain and sprocket. Seen quite a few of those. Somebody caught in there. And that is a rotating chains and sprocket. And somebody with long hair got their hair caught in it. One nice thing I liked about the chicken plant, don't worry about the hair, because everybody had to wear hair nets. So hair was not a hazard in the plant itself. Now, in the other feed mills and stuff like that, it was. So anytime you're working around, moving parts, hair is not a good idea. Long hair is not a good idea. It's got to have company policy to have a hair put up in hair nets if it's over your whatever, I don't know, height over your collar or something. I don't know. I never wrote a policy on hair, but it's something to look into, because that's what happens, and it's not pleasant. This is some kind of a huge shaft, and I don't know how this guy got in there, but he did, and he can't get out. Well, that's some help, and I'm sure that hurts. I'm probably going to leave a mark too. Spoke flywheel, get you very dangerous there too. Augers, screw, conveyor and trough. In the chicken plants, they used to have in the floor augers like this to move product, and they were taken out before I got there, and because they had guys that would get their foot caught in there, and that'd be it, man. Your foot's gone. Like this guy, well, his foot was the only thing left of him. The augers are nasty stuff, and it happens too fast. Wasn't in a plant, but there was a feed mill, a feed hall driver, and he was a contract driver at the feed mill Heaver, and his truck inside slipped, of course, down to there's an auger that moves the grain out, and something was inside, got stuck or something. I don't know what happened. He went inside the truck, and he left his cell phone out on the fender of the truck, and he got in there and he got in an auger, and it got his leg and took his leg off. He somehow got out of the truck and called for help, but he lost his leg, and he wasn't an employee of ours, so I don't know what happened to him after that. But why would you even get anywhere near one of these things? It's beyond me. And that's what an auger will do to a hand, a little tiny auger like that. Rack and pinion. It's a rack and pinion. You've heard that most of the time you call it in cars, rack and pinion steering. Cutting action removes materials, saws, grinding wheels, planers, drills, punching, shearing, bending, stamping, power presses, shears, benders, usually in metalworking is where they're commonly found. Cutting, that's the whole saw there. Punching parts out. When it was first into the OSHA came out, there was a lot of punch press operators, and they had basically nothing there before OSHA came out. And every punch press operator who had ever worked a punch press that I knew of had a part of at least one finger missing on the punch press. And after OSHA came on, they kind of, I wouldn't say eliminated it, but they cut those down dramatically. Shearing, cutting something off, cut your finger off too, wouldn't even know it's there. Bending or forming parts there. There's the way you do it in a part stamping machine. That's a light curtain around there, it looks like. So if you put anything through there, it will shut that machine off. That's the right way to do it, but it's got to work. So if you have something like that in your plant, that's great, but you got to make sure it works. This is a terrible picture. There's a body light covered with a sheet at the bottom of it. This is a huge stamping operation. I don't know whether it's for car parts or whatever. How this guy got in there, I don't know, but that red stuff hanging down is part of them. So not nasty. So hazards, we talked about controls earlier. Now we talked about hazards, and hazards are, wait for it, hazardous. That's why they're called hazards. So that's the gist of this class is a unit of that course is physical hazards control. So not chemical or biological hazards, but physical hazards, which we kind of gave you a gamut there of various physical hazards and what you can do to control them. So that's what we're going to be talking about through most of this course and somewhere or another. And so that's it for right now. I'll catch you later. Be safe.